Hello and welcome to another homework help video. Economists are often interested in determining how much prices in an economy have increased or decreased over time. So, one way to measure price changes is the GDP deflator. This video looks at calculating the GDP deflator. Before looking at the topic of the GDP deflator, let's take a minute to review the concepts of GDP, nominal GDP, and real GDP. Let's also look at the GDP deflator and how to calculate it. Gross domestic product is the amount of goods and services an economy produces in a given period. Economists calculate GDP by summing the total value of each good or service produced in the economy, or the quantity of each good produced times its market price. GDP only includes currently produced goods, so houses built 30 years ago or cars built 3 years ago are not counted in GDP. Also, it doesn't explicitly count goods sold to produce other goods. So the steel used to produce cars is not counted directly as part of GDP, but in the car's final price. Nominal gross domestic product, or GDP, is GDP calculated using the prices and quantities of goods from the current period. For example, if an economist is calculating nominal GDP for 2023, she would use prices and quantities from 2023. Real gross domestic product is GDP calculated using the prices from a period designated as a reference or base period and the quantities of goods from the current period. For example, if an economist is calculating the real GDP for 2023 and the base period was 2021, she uses prices from 2021 and quantities from 2023 for her calculation. The base year nominal GDP and the real GDP are equal. The implied GDP deflator, or just the GDP deflator, measures the amount of increase or decrease in prices between the current period and the reference or base period, and is the ratio of nominal GDP in the current period and real GDP for a base period. The formula for the GDP deflator is: the GDP deflator equals the nominal GDP in current year divided by real GDP in the base year. Now let's look at a typical problem statement. An economy has a nominal GDP of $500 billion in 2023. The real GDP using 2021 as the base year is $400 billion. What is the GDP deflator for 2023? Let's look at how to calculate the GDP deflator. 1. Write the formula for the GDP deflator. GDP deflator equals the nominal GDP for a given period divided by the real GDP for the base period. 2. From the problem statement, substitute the nominal GDP into the formula. 3. From the problem statement, substitute the real GDP into the formula. 4. Divide the nominal GDP by the real GDP. Now let's work through the problem statement using the steps from the previous section. 1. Write the formula for the GDP deflator. GDP deflator equals the nominal GDP divided by the real GDP. 2. From the problem statement, substitute the nominal GDP into the formula. In the problem statement, the nominal GDP is $500 billion. So, let's substitute $500 billion into the formula. 3. From the problem statement, substitute the real GDP into the formula. In the problem statement, the real GDP is $400 billion. So, let's substitute $400 billion into the formula. 4. Divide the nominal GDP by the real GDP. In the problem statement, the nominal GDP is $500 billion, and the real GDP is $400 billion. So, dividing $500 billion by $400 billion is 1.25. This video looked at calculating and interpreting the GDP deflator. The video defined the terms GDP, nominal GDP, and real GDP. It also defined the term GDP deflator, provided a formula, and how to interpret the calculation. The video presented a typical problem statement. Next, it provided the steps to calculate the GDP deflator. Finally, the video worked on the problem statement using the steps. If you want additional examples of calculating the GDP deflator, click one of the cards or use the links in the description below to watch those videos. If you want to try a practice problem independently, There is a link in the description below. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please put them in the comments section below. Until the next homework help video, best wishes on your economic studies.